Okay, thank you again. And I think after the talk from Paolo, it is very difficult to highlight more topics, but I would like to go maybe to make some practical exercise with early career scientists that are here. So first, I would like to go on the title. Title should be short, right? And I just invented a title. So role of interleukin 198 for ACLF in cirrhosis. This is a really short title, but it doesn't say much, right? Because it doesn't say what it does and what is behind it. So it's a title which is, okay, there's a role, but is there a role, a big role, a small role? So you have to be a little bit more precise. And then the other thing is, then you can go more in detail and you can say important interaction of interleukin 198 in cellular compartment of the hepatocyte of multibody cells and diet-induced MASH cirrhosis developing ACLF. So this is also a title which is like an abstract, right? So we should also avoid this and try to use fewer words. This is also just a, I don't say that this is the real final title, but this could be a way, you know, that we say, okay, it induces ACLF, so we have an action, is a clear interaction, there is a causality or there is a direction, and for example, okay, not compartments, but this ER stress in hepatocytes, for example. So we have to be more precise, we have to highlight the key findings in the title so that the editor or the reviewer then reads it. First, this gets curious, and second, gives also a little bit of the direction where it goes. Because usually when you write a paper, many times also when you look into the PubMed, then you look for the titles, and the first thing that comes up are the titles and then the authors and the journal. So this is basically the same. And then you go further deeper, and especially this also accounts for review articles. So the more catchy and concise and the main bringing the main message, the title is, the better it is. And of course, it has to match with the journal. This is very clear. So this would be my first thing that I would like to say. And then, of course, the next thing that Paolo already said is the abstract. Of course, it's clear. The structure is clear. Background, and which ends with the aims should be what's known and what's not. So what is really very short and concise, not too much words. We have a limited number of words, and especially this needs to be attractive for the readers, right? In the material and methods, key experiments. So what makes your study special? It's also important to highlight not every Western blot technique or every PCR technique and all the markers that you did, but also the overall concept, everything you did. So you did in vivo, in vitro, ex vivo work, what kind of material you use, what kind of cohorts you use. So be concise. It's of course difficult, but I think this is very important that one tries its very best. And the results, don't mention each Western blot, lab value comparison, each control group and everything, but focus on the main findings of your study and what is the main message that you bring. And this is also the result that we put in the abstract. Not necessarily everything that is in the paper needs to be in the abstract. And the conclusion, few messages, not too much. Don't overload it. As Paolo said, best would be answer one question. Maybe the paper is too big. You can answer 2 questions, 3 questions, but not 10. So we cannot solve the world with the paper. So just be aware that just go for the main messages and few messages. So what are the parts of the paper? I would say it's like preparing a meal. So you start with the introduction, and you have to preparing the introduction. You have to say first, what are the ingredients? What is the problem? And then we say, okay, how we prepare all these ingredients that we have. These are the methods. Then the result is the nicely presented meal. In this case, it's a nice sweet. And then, of course, the discussion is very important also, because you have to discuss everything. Like you have to think like you are discussing with your best friends, and you are discussing on hot topics like, for example, pandemics. Yeah, pandemics is a very good example because everybody has 2 different opinions on that. So each of us has 2 opinions, not 1, 2. In the paper, you have to see that there are people thinking differently of your paper, thinking differently of your results. So you have to weigh their arguments and so on. And of course, in the end, we should also go for the outlook and the perspective. What is the thing? So in the end, just write few words why this paper is important and what are the key findings and how it goes in the future. So this would be for me the main parts of the paper. Now the question is, of course, how do we go with the style? So I would like to go for Dante Alighieri on purpose, of course, because this is one of the greatest poets of our time. And indeed, I brought you something translated into English. through me you pass into the city of woe, through me you pass into eternal pain, through me among the people lost for a. So don't be poetic. This is too poetic. So if you use the style, don't use poesy in your. And the same thing what also Paulo said. Don't be funny. Yeah. So this is. I don't think it's a good way to be too poetic, to change too much your language. Just use similar words that people can always follow. The next example is Donald Trump. Donald Trump had very nice quotes. I didn't know that. When I was preparing this talk, I was looking for Donald Trump because I thought that there was I will find something there. You know, and that indeed, everything in life is luck. I don't make deals for money. I've got enough, much more than I ever needed. I do it to do it. So very impressive quotes. The other one, as long as you are going to be thinking anyway, think big. Why not? Or I don't make deals for money. I've got them more than I need. I do it to do it. Yeah, it's the same as here before. So for him, it's the same quotes every time. And also, experience taught me a few things. One is to listen to your gut, no matter how good something sounds on paper. He ignores the facts, and we know that already. So you should not ignore the facts. Okay, so the style here is too vernacular, too primacy, and too stupid in the end. So use common sense, but try to avoid things that are not founded in facts. So this is very important also for writing a paper. Not all common knowledge is common knowledge, right? Then I would like to highlight the German. We cannot miss the German. We have an Italian, we have an American, now a German, and probably I don't know whether you know him. This is Thomas Mann. He's a big writer in Germany. And he's especially famous for his long sentences. So these are also, again, translated into English. So if the years of your, if you read this, or if you read this sentence, it's tough, right? And the question is, it's a lot of prosa inside. It's a lot of thoughts, deep thoughts, but it is difficult to read in a paper in the introduction, right? Similar to this one. Nothing is more curious and awkward than the relationship of two people who know you all each other with their eyes, and so on and so on and so on. When I was trying to, I have to cite my mentor now, Thomas Auburg. When I was writing papers with him, when I was a fellow, he always told me that I tried to make a lot of sentences that they are very nicely go in each other and so on. And he said to me, Thomas Mann, no, one sentence, one meaning. So try to be short, concise, not too long sentences. And indeed, I don't know whether this guy, Winston Churchill, was a big scientist. Nevertheless, he had some good quotes, which I like to highlight here. The first one was, if you have an important point to make, don't try to be subtle or clever. Use a pile driver. The pile driver is like to make a hole to make a pile into the earth. So hit the point once, then come back and hit it again. Then hit it third time, a tremendous wall. So what we have to do is to tell to our readers, this is important. And then again, repeat it, this is important. So if they always see the same pattern, they understand it probably better. No, and this stays in the memory. So it's very important that you come back always to the initial point. And another one, which I found it also very interesting, is you will never get to the end of the journey if you stop to shy a stone at every dog that barks. So go to the main point and don't put too much data on the paper, and don't put too much points that may be relevant or important. Nevertheless, go to the mainstream, because then you don't lose people on the way to your goal. So the introduction, for example, again, we go to our paper. Liver is an organ located in the abdomen. If you start with that, you're lost, right? So this is sometimes some thesis start with. You make a thesis on liver cirrhosis, and they start, okay, liver is an organ which weighs 1.5 kilograms, blah, blah, blah. Not so good. If you have limited time for the reviewer to read it, you have limited time for the editors to read it, and also the researchers which are interested in your topic, they have limited time. Don't go also, liver disease has been already mentioned by the ancient Greek and so on. So this is not so good. Liver disease is common. The most common pathologies are alcohol, prevalence, incidence, and so on and so on. Go to the point. What is your topic? What are the main goals? What is the main results? And For example, liver cirrhosis associated with high morbidity, mortality, NASH is an emerging cause, ACLF, blah, blah, blah. So you have to make a bridge from your introduction to your results, and also the methods should be also clear. So the introduction should be not a puzzle. You have to reduce complexity. So if this is like that, nobody will read it, nobody will find the way out of your introduction. You should reduce complexity. There should be a very clear path through your introduction. And also another thing which is very important is sometimes within the group we go through the papers and then say, okay, but maybe we didn't mention before. Yes, we mentioned in the introduction there was one sentence. So don't try the Lonely Planet guide. You know, the Lonely Planet guide is it's nice to travel because you have everything there. You look something up. But I think if you read the paper, what you need is a guide that guide you through the manuscript. So they show you, okay, this way, please. So we have this problem, this problem, this problem, this way. So don't try to make everything complete. Try to make it clear and very simple. So prepare for the results. What's known, what's not. Why did you do it? Why it's needed for the field? Why it's important for the journal? And especially the length. If you have a paper, if you have to review a paper, or if you have to read a paper, which the introduction is 3 pages, then it's already very, very difficult to keep everything which is already mentioned in the introduction, to keep it to the methods and then to the results and then to the discussion. So it's very, very difficult. So please be short. So it's one thing that I ask you and I beg you as a reviewer, this makes the life easier. So materials and methods, never forget ethics, description of the cohorts, previously published papers of the same cohort. For example, you mentioned the cohort, for example, predict. When we did the second paper of predict, you have to cite already the methods, the first paper of predict. Similar for other cohorts which have several papers on top, and this will be the case in decision, I think, because all cohorts of decision have been published or will be published, hopefully, and this is very important. We already cite them in the material methods. Causes validation for your key experiments, calculations are important to say how you do it. Definition of the key endpoints, outcomes. This is the place where you have to define the key endpoints and outcomes. And try to show the same findings conclusion with different techniques. For example, you show it on the protein level, RNA level, on the stainings. So you keep on different levels, you show the same thing. Then your data are more solid than if you have only one marker that is high in serum, but not in plasma, for example. So this is something that it's very important that you try to do it with your methods. The results, there are 2 different ways. Find the murder, so you just write up the results and you say to the people, okay, find what is the most important thing, or you go and say, this is the murder. So if you find the murder, you say, okay, first is the victim, then you have the knife, then you show the results on the knife, then you show the fingerprint on the knife, then you show the murder, the picture, and then finally the proof that this murder killed the victim, you know? So if you have all this, then please go through step by step on that and make a story out of it, because also the results is nice if you increase the tense through writing the results. I show you some results, figures from our group, and indeed this was the first draft. We have different animal models here, we have a lot of information and so on. Not so nice. Then finally we did it like this, and this was what was finally published. There are a few things that you can change. For example, put an animal here, you have the age, you have all the different treatments and so on. It makes it nicer and more acceptable for the readers. And also it's basically the same information as here, but it's still different. Or another thing is, for example, we have a lot of stainings here. We have serious rate stainings and all the calculations, the comparisons between the groups, and you have so many groups and so many comparisons. In the end, what we decided to do is to reduce it in few. First, you highlight what is important, you reduce the groups, and you put, especially when you present the results, try to put single points, because it is so important. Don't show just bars and standard errors of the mean, which is really the best fake, actually, scientific fake, because it doesn't show the distribution of the data, it doesn't show anything. So try to go for standard deviation and mean, and especially show the distribution of the data, because everybody believes you. First, they see how many animals you used or how many samples you use. And second, also, they can also see whether this is a stable thing, whether this is a statistical bias or whatever. No? If there is a strong statistical significance, this is fine. By statistic, you know the statistics are also dependent on many other things, how you do it, which test you use, and so on and so on. Another example is we looked into the data from Germany over time, and then we saw that in different etiologies of other diseases, if cirrhosis is a comorbidity, mortality increases. And you see here the cirrhosis and others. So there are different colors for different diseases, and the dotted lines are always the disease, the respective disease with cirrhosis. And indeed, when we saw this first, we were discussing how can we improve it. We have here the timeline, but in the end, when we have such a graph where we put here mortality rate with cirrhosis, without cirrhosis, and the different mortalities, then the main message is if you have cirrhosis as a comorbidity, it goes up. So mortality increases. And this is also the message here. Nevertheless, you have so many data here and so many lines and so many colors that you cannot really see what is the main message of the paper. So you have less information here. You reduce the dimension, you reduce the information, but the message is very clear and it's striking because this is about it. We have to present our results in a striking way that the reviewers, the readers, and everybody thinks, okay, this is great. Figures like this are very welcome because you can put them on a presentation and you have a message very clear to the audience. Okay, discussion. Don't forget, the reviewers are not your friends. Right? Because your friends are either on the paper or they will not be elected as reviewers, right? So this is very important. First, second, the reviewers may be your competitors even. They may be in the same field. And it is very likely that they are in the same field because otherwise they will not be experts for the same field. So you should be aware of it also. So never copy paste. If you have a copy paste thing, first, the journal will know it. And second, you may also lose your titles. We had several examples in Germany, for example, that we had ministers that lose their doctoral degrees because they did a lot of copy pasting. So avoid copy pasting, even though they are your own work. So it's very important. Write it from the beginning, write it from the start. The readers don't forgive mistakes, right? You have a lot of letters. This is sometimes good, sometimes bad. Good because it shows that your work raised interest, but it's also bad if you have really big mistakes in your paper, and then you got a lot of criticism. Always try to summarize the key findings in the session. Discuss each of the crucial findings in the different point of opinions, because as we said, there are so many opinions. Highlight the limitations of your study. It's also very important. And don't speculate too much. If you speculate, then clearly say that this is aware that the reviewer may and will ask for it. If you say something around this and that, then be aware that they might ask for it. So if you have the data ready, then it's perfect. But then you have to be also willing to perform the experiment. And don't write about things that you cannot prove. Because this also, we are talking about science here. We're not talking about opinions. And especially don't be Donald Trump. So it's very important. So references, also, this is, I think, my last slide. The published literature, don't forget. Always reference only papers that you have read yourself. Many of the people, they don't read the papers, but they read the review. So read it yourself. Read the paper yourself that you are citing. And also don't inflate with citations. Important is that what you put there is really true. Don't forget the groups working in the field, the different opinions on the topic. Each statement needs a reference. I think this is also important. And you can lose your title if you don't reference carefully. So that's all. Thank you for your attention.